evening, everyone, and thank you for coming. We are privileged to have with us this evening Dr. Del Siegle. He is the Lynn and Ray Neag Endowed Chair for Talent Development in the Neag School of Education at the University of Connecticut, where he was honored as a teaching fellow. Prior to his earning his PhD, Del worked as a gifted and talented coordinator in Montana. He is a past president of the National Association for Gifted Children and has served on the board of directors of the Association for Gifted Children. He also is the past chair of AERA, Research on Giftedness and Creativity and Talent, and that's a SIG. So that's a, help me out here, Del. SIG is?
There's subgroups within the AERA, the American Education Research Association. So
okay.
There are divisions and there are SIGs, and it's a specialty group that's interested in gifted education and research related to it.
Awesome. Thanks. He has also been co-editor of the Journal of Advanced Academics and Gifted Child Quarterly. He writes a technology column for the Gifted Child Today. Del's research interests include web-based instruction, motivation of gifted students, and teacher bias in identification of students for gifted programs. Along with Gary Davis and Sylvia Rim, he is an author of the popular textbook, Education of the Gifted and Talented. It's a 6th or 7th edition now. He is the director of the National Center for Research on Gifted Education. That's a big deal. He is also director of the Renzulli Center for Creativity, Gifted Education, and Talent Development, and has written extensively on his research regarding underachievement in gifted children and high potential students, which is our topic for today. He's also a much loved professor, but he won't admit that, at the University of Connecticut at Storrs. So good evening, Del.
Hey, good evening. Thanks for having me.
Let's talk about underachievement in highly able students. Okay?
Okay.
So what does the word underachievement mean, do you think, to the general public?
Well, I think probably to parents, it usually means that their child isn't probably earning the grades that the parents believe they should be earning, in school. I think for classroom teachers, there might be some of that, but I also think for classroom teachers, they also might be making some judgments based on how the student is embracing learning, and whether they are curious and inquisitive and interested in ideas and how well they hand in their homework. Those are all kind of the traditional things that teachers look at. This kid's probably underachieving if they will feel a kid is underachieving if they, for example, aren't handing in homework, for example. And of course, parents look at those report cards and they like to see those A's.
Yeah.
I'm a parent. I like to see the A's, So.
Well, how do you, as a researcher of underachievement, define it?
Well, there's pretty universal agreement on the more generic definition. And that more generic definition is that it's a discrepancy between potential and performance. So we have high potential. We would expect that we have high performance, assuming there aren't some intervening factors such as a learning disability or something. So that's the most common definition. Actually, Sally Reese and Betsy McCoach, Betsy McCoach is my wife, and you know Sally well, your friends. Sally Reese and Betsy McCoach, I think it was around 2000, wrote a classic article on underachievement, and they proposed a definition quite similar to that. And it gets cited a lot in the literature. Where the controversy starts to happen is, okay, so when you say it's a discrepancy between performance and potential, what are you talking about for performance and what are you talking for potential? Because you get very different things. So say you have a student with a very high IQ, for example, and we know that giftedness is more than just that, but let's just take IQ for a second. And they have very low grades. Well,
Mm,
the parent and the teacher probably say this is an underachiever, right? It seems like
mm.
that. But what if that student who has that high IQ is acing the achievement tests every year, the state achievement test? So now we have this kid up in the 99th percentile on IQ and the 99th percentile on achievement tests.
Yeah.
Is this kid an underachiever now? You'd say, well, no. But then someone says, yeah, but look at the grades. But somehow the kid's still learning. They're just not quite playing the school game. And so that's where things get a little controversial because some would say that this kid's still an underachiever because of the grades. Others would say, no. And the kid might say, get off my back. I'm learning this stuff. I'm just choosing not to play the school game. And
Mm,
so then part of this whole underachievement world is how much are they willing to play the school game? And is playing the school game important? And I'm not here to put down the school game, by the way, because McCall and some other authors did a book where they did a longitudinal study and they looked at kids who were underachieving by grades in high school and they looked at their accomplishments as they went out into the world. Okay.
mm,
And it's an older study. Uh, but what they found is that a high IQ kid with mediocre grades tended to kind of do in life what uh, average student did with mediocre grades, that the life productivity kind of matched the grades a little bit more than the IQ.
mm,
And so that would say, okay, so there is something about achieving in school. There is something about being willing sometimes to make compromises, uh, meeting deadlines. So there is something to it. So we can't totally discredit the school piece, but
mm.
there are a lot of kids who turn it around. You're looking at one uh, who I did all right in high school, but I wasn't any kind of superstar by any means. I was a mediocre student. And then much later in life, I didn't go to college till I was 26 because I didn't think I was smart enough to go to college. So I went to college for the first time at 26. And everything at college was just so intriguing to me, and every class was so interesting. And I
Mm.
just embraced it. And I aced college, and that's how I got into gifted ed because I had such a great GPA. And when I was interviewing for jobs, they said, "Oh, wow, look at that GPA. This guy can teach gifted," which is not necessarily the qualification for teaching gifted. Having a good GPA, you ought to know something about it. So just because you have a child that maybe doesn't have outstanding grades in high school, that doesn't mean the kid's doomed for life. But
Right.
but that discrepancy, it's usually a discrepancy, and sometimes we use the grades as the measure of the performance. Sometimes we use test scores.
Mm.
Gene Peterson would say that we shouldn't really be too concerned about a kid unless there isn't anything the kid excels at, because
Ah.
Jim Delisle also used to talk about selective achievers.
Mm.
I have a passion about this and I work on that, and that's what I do. And so just because you're a selective achiever and have this passion for this one thing and choose not to do these other things,
Mhm.
is it fair to say you're an underachiever? And then who gets to label it? Are you an underachiever or am I an underachiever because someone I don't do or you don't do what someone wants us to do? Uh, I I think I may be, an example. So I'm 6 foot tall. I think I used to be 6'1", but now I'm 6 foot tall. I'm getting older. Uh, and I went to a little high school with 47 students in the senior class. Okay. So it's a small high school in Montana. I was probably the tallest male in that high school. I did not play basketball. You need every male on the basketball team. Okay. Uh, But I had no interest in basketball. I was uncoordinated. I had limited vision back then because before I'd had my various eye surgeries. And so the last thing I wanted was these things flying at me. And so I was not a basketball player. I got a lot of pressure to play basketball. You should be playing basketball. Okay. If I had been 7 foot tall, there'd have been even more pressure. And so uh, some could say I was an underachieving basketball player. I would really been considered an underachieving basketball player if I was 7 foot tall. But that's not what I wanted to do. So So this whole idea is you're underachieving because you don't do what I want you to do. That's
Mhm.
dangerous. And so as parents, we want, and teachers, we want to be very reluctant about actually labeling somebody as an underachiever per se.
Mhm.
They may simply be a selective achiever. They just may not be interested in that. And do they have the
So,
right to do that? It's debatable.
yeah, I hear you saying that interest plays a big part.
Oh, yeah.
And I've got a couple stories of my own too. I have a nephew who got like C's, D's, and F all through high school, stayed up in the middle of the night, would get up in the middle of the night and play video games, and then got a perfect score on the SAT.
Yeah. So he's a bright kid and he has the knowledge base. And the whole point, well, a big part of school is to teach you the stuff so you can get that great score on that SAT.
And my brother was 6'4" and literally tripped over his own feet one day trying to tie his shoes on the curb of the street. He fell into the street and he didn't want to play basketball either.
Hey, I've got a partner.
Yeah. So, what got you so interested in this particular topic? Was it your own personal background?
Not initially. Uh, it's when I was a teacher and I had some kids, or in particular one male, that was really brilliant and just skated by all the time. And it really frustrated me because he was just so bright. And, I'd love to have had his brain, to be honest, and just doing well, good enough.
Mm.
And then an interesting thing happened. He became interested in this scholarship to go off to a private prep school. And
Mm.
so he just turned his grades around dramatically. And then he
Mm.
didn't end up getting the scholarship. And he went right back to where he was. And so it was just kind of frustrating. So that was my initial interest. And then the second was kind of an odd thing. When we identified kids for our gifted program, we used a lot of different criteria. And one of the things we used was Frank Williams' creative assessment packet, which isn't used much anymore today. And I don't even know if it's available. But it used to have this self-report survey that kids would fill out, and it would give us a score for imagination and for risk-taking and for complexity. And so we were looking to identify kids who like to take intellectual risks, and we put them into the gifted program, in some cases, even if the other scores weren't there. And my job was then to take those kids and turn them into achievers because they had this curiosity and this need to learn stuff. And I usually pretty successful. And so I was really interested in why are some kids interested to take risks and intellectual risks and other risks? And we're not talking about physical risks now, but why are
Yeah,
some
yeah.
kids interested to take risks and other kids not interested to take risks? So when I came to get my PhD, then that's what I was interested in. Is okay, this whole idea, what gives people this confidence to take risks? And that's where I stumbled up into the world of self-efficacy, this confidence people have that they can do something, which is a big part of the work in underachievement. And so then the pieces started to come together. Okay, I have this interest and this interest in self-efficacy. And so that all kind of got put together. And then I realized, hey, I was one, at that point, because it hadn't occurred to me before then. That, yeah, I suppose people looking at me thought I was one. So just a combination of things and just always interested in what motivates people and what gives them confidence and why they want to do well.
Can you say a little bit more about what self-efficacy is? Because if I'm a parent and I'm watching this, I'm not at all sure I would know what you mean by that.
Sure. A guy from Stanford, a researcher at Stanford University, is deceased now. Albert Bandura came up with it. And his writing is pretty hard to read. I always joke that he doesn't use any words with fewer than 5 or 6 syllables, and his sentences have to contain at least 100 words each. So his writing's pretty dense. I don't want to put him down, but he's a brilliant man.
Yeah.
So he came up with this this idea of self-efficacy. And self-efficacy is your belief of your capacity to achieve something, to do something.
Mm,
So it's not your belief whether you're going to be successful, though, because there are lots of factors that could lead to success. It's the belief that you have the ability to do it.
mm,
Okay. And so it plays into gifted ed quite a bit because you know, when we say identify a kid as gifted,
mhm,
and the kid might like that uh, label, feel quite good about it, uh, and so they may believe they have the ability to do stuff, but they may still
mm,
choose not to do it because they're not interested in it. It's not important. They can't learn from that teacher. So there are lots of reasons why people achieve or don't achieve.
mm,
But before we ever tackle anything, we have to say, I'm capable of doing this. I could do this if I wanted to do this. And if the world were set up such that I could be successful at it. So that's what self-efficacy is. It's one piece of the model that Betsy and I have to kind of explain underachievement and motivation. But it is a key one. And in the gifted world, it's kind of an interesting one because it's not just enough aside from these other factors that I talked about, it's just not it's not just enough to be efficacious, but you kind of also have to believe why you have the ability. I don't know if that makes any
mm,
sense. And we can go to kind of, Carol Dweck's work on mindsets, which a lot of people know. I don't know if parents watching this would know, but that this malleable mindset or the fixed
right.
mindset. Uh, and it's somewhat controversial, so how much you can actually change somebody's mindset.
Mm,
But one of the issues is that, and a big thing that I've talked about for quite a while is if you have this gifted child and this individual, and they've been told that they're gifted, and they haven't been told why they're gifted or how they got to be gifted, and we're sometimes afraid to talk about it as parents, you know, in the town where I worked, we didn't call it the gifted program. We called it STEP. We give them these goofy names for these programs, even to kind of hide what it is.
mm,
It was kind of funny because when the kids that I taught, and I had them for fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh grade, and they graduate from high school, and I remember this girl saying to me one day after graduation, she said, Mr. Siegle, it was really weird. At this school, the top 10% on their grade sat in the front row at graduation. I don't know whether that's good or bad, but that's where they sat. She said, Mr. Siegle, it was really odd. All the step kids were sitting in the front row. And I'm thinking, well, they better have been sitting in the front row. We were assuming you guys were the top of the class. But it never had occurred to her that that's what our program was. But I digress there. But so you're this little person, you come to school, it's pretty easy. You don't have to work too hard. You pick up ideas quickly. Your parents have done a nice job of prepping you. They read to you. You might be reading, you might not be reading, but you're showing up at school and it's working really great. And somewhere along that path, they tell you you're gifted, and you think that's kind of cool because grandpa and grandma are really proud about that. And you be bopping through life, and then you hit about fourth grade. And
mhm,
all of a sudden, stuff starts to get tough.
yeah.
And that's kind of scary because you've never had it tough. I remember one of the kids in our program because we started them in fourth grade. We should have started them sooner, but we didn't. And he said, I had homework last night. I said, yeah. He said, well, I didn't like that because his entire life he didn't have to do homework because he could get it done in school.
Yeah.
Wow, suddenly I've got to take stuff home. I don't like that. I said, well, you better get used to it because it's going to keep going on. But the point is, the world starts to get a little harder, and you maybe have to put a little more effort into it, or you maybe even have to just kind of think about how you do stuff as opposed to just run on auto drive.
Yeah.
Now, for those who have what Dweck would call a fixed mindset, which is a belief that you're as smart as you are, okay? Um, And if they love their gifted label, because it's a nice label to have, they have what's called a performance orientation. And I'm going to take you to sidestep for a
Mhm,
second. So we're known for basketball here. So Gino Oriyama, we like to call ourselves UConn the basketball capital of the world. We're having a little trouble with one of our teams right now, but Gino Ariama, he does these summer camps, and kids come to the camp, and some kids coming to the camp are I'm going to show Gino Oriama and those UConn players how good I am. You know, I got to show my stuff.
Mhm.
And that's a performance orientation. Okay.
Mm.
Others are coming to say, I'm going to learn so much at this camp from these coaches. I'm going to get so much better. That's this learning orientation. So they're not about showing how good they are, and they're willing to make the mistakes and look stupid sometimes on the way to getting better. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Dweck had found that those who have that learning orientation tend to have this malleable mindset, and those who have this performance orientation tend to have this fixed mindset.
Mm.
So we're back to our little gifted kid who has this fixed mindset. Got to show how good he is, because that's what it's about. And he likes being gifted. And so here come these difficult things to do.
Mm.
And what if I don't do well on this? What if I do this project and it isn't perfect? Because there's perfectionism that plays in there
Yeah.
too. What if it isn't an A? What does that mean? Well, in their mind, it means they're not gifted anymore
Right.
because everything is fixed and I'm always good and school should be easy.
Yep.
And so, because of that, they can get paralyzed. And
Mm.
for some of them, not all of them, but for some of them, they won't even do it. They'll just stop. They won't they won't hand in a paper if they don't think it's good enough. And
Mhm.
you say, well, so what? You get a B. So what? But it might mean I'm not gifted because they don't see that their giftedness is malleable and they can get better and better and better and that they had something to do with developing it. It didn't just happen to them. They're lucky enough to have this great little brain that can maybe process information more quickly, handle more bits of information, all kinds of stuff, but they still learned stuff, you know, and they grew. And what they know today, they did not know 2 years ago or 3 years ago, but they
Right.
failed to see that they have been developing their gifts all along and they think it's a fixed thing. And so they simply choose not to do it because if they do it and fail, everyone's going to find out they're not gifted. By
Mhm.
not handing it in, by taking an F, they're safe because they can say, I didn't do it. If
Mhm.
I'd done
Oh,
it, I could. Or maybe they said, this doesn't really interest me, so it's not my best work.
mm.
Or maybe they procrastinate and wait till the last minute because then if it doesn't meet expectations, I've got an excuse too. Well, I just did it in the last minute. It's a rush job. It really wasn't the best I could do. So it's really dangerous for young gifted kids to have this fixed mindset
Mhm.
and this value of giftedness because
Right.
what happens is it gives this maladaptive behavior
Mhm.
and Kate Snyder and Lincolnberg Garcia said that there are like two pathways. One is that pathway where you love this title of giftedness and you have this identity that things should be easy
Mhm.
because of your early achievement, and
Mhm.
that results in you being an underachiever. They also have this declining value pathway that says that there's insufficient challenge in schoolwork
Mm.
and you don't see value in it. So you don't connect effort with something positive and you underachieve as well. On
Got
that second one, you know, the insufficient challenge in school, pretty much all of us believe that gifted kids who aren't sufficiently challenging, that can lead to underachievement. But we don't have any hard research data to back it up yet. I still
Hmm.
believe it myself. Okay.
Me too.
Yeah. Uh, but there aren't any real hard, solid studies, and they would be hard to do because you'd have to take some kids and not challenge some of them and challenge some of them and see how many ended up underachieving. We're not going to be able to pull that research off. You know, it's not ethical.
No.
And so through interviews and stuff, we have some data to support some of this, but there isn't a really hard scientific study that can back us up on that. And that was a long answer to a question. I don't even remember what it was.
Yeah. Well, we see a lot of that at Ideal because it's the first time for almost all of them, no matter how old they are when they join us, that they have been challenged. And the challenge might be very small, but there's almost a guarantee that in the end of the first month or the beginning of the second month, they're going to shut down.
Yeah.
And they're going to go, I can't do this. I'm not as smart as I thought I was.
And some of that has to do with the fixed mindset, and some of that has to do with other factors too. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's almost a given. And because of this factor of things having been easy before, and they associate that with their success. That, yeah, I can look at this and I can right away know, you know, what to do with it. We have a lot of them who skim the instructions
Yeah.
and then, because that's always been enough. Yeah, I read the
Yeah.
bold print and I've been on this kind of thing before. So uh, we have a period of time in the cycle of them uh, almost learning how to let go of that and saying, inch by inch by inch, and being really, really careful at that point about the degree of challenge. We don't give up challenging them, but we're really, really careful not to challenge them too much when that phenomenon comes,
Yeah.
because yeah,
You can lose them. You don't throw them in the deep end.
no, we're not. We don't want to throw them in the deep end. They can just
Yeah.
put a toe in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've also heard that the term underachiever isn't really appropriate because it it says that there's something wrong with the kid, and it makes it sort of like an illness or a pathology.
Yeah.
And so um, could the school, well, we sort of talked about this. If the school were to challenge them a little bit more or focus more on their interests, do you think that that might change their students' path?
I think for many, yes. The challenge, for example, that it needs to start as soon as they arrive. So to wait until you're in third or fourth grade before you encounter anything difficult,
Yeah.
uh, you just have a different kind of mindset about what this place is. Also, if you're not learning anything really new every day, and that's kind of in my mantra, everyone has a right to learn something new every day, and just because you're gifted or that you already know it doesn't mean that schools should sacrifice that right for you to have this right to learn something new every day. Uh, so this little kid coming in kindergarten, if the little kid knows everything we're going to be covering in kindergarten today, then I think the teacher has an obligation to put some new stuff there so that they can come to expect that this is a place where I do get new content. So they don't just assume this is a place where I know everything, and then suddenly at fourth grade, it isn't that same place anymore. It's like we've switched what school is for them. If you think about it, we just turned the tables on them. And they said, wait a minute, what happened here? Uh, well, we didn't change anything, but it's just we weren't accommodating them, so it appeared like we did a quick magic act here. So yeah, I agree with you. That we need to have that opportunity that they're learning stuff every day, and that this is an interesting place, and you're going to discover new stuff, and you're going to learn how to learn that new stuff. And so
Mm,
that I think is a big step towards it. And then interest, you mentioned interest also, and Joe Renzulli, that's a big deal in all of Joe
yeah.
Renzulli's work here at the University of Connecticut, and you cannot overlook the role of interest. We did a study with honor students here, freshman honor students, and we asked them how talented they were in all kinds of different things, and we asked how interested they were in all kinds of things. And there's a a statistically significant relationship every time, that if
Hmm.
you're interested, you tend to do well. Now, we don't know if being interested causes you to do well or
Mm.
doing well causes you to be interested, but I
Right,
don't care which direction it goes because they're connected. And
right.
so pay attention to what this kid's interested in and tie it to what they're doing in school as parents. Build it,
Mm,
help them build it into a project they're doing for at school,
mm,
because it is a really powerful motivator, just as choice is a powerful motivator. I
right.
was thinking about it. Okay, I go to Blaze Pizza and I love the idea I can tell you exactly what I want on my pizza. But you can go to Subway and you have exactly what you want on your sub. You
Mhm.
can turn on your TV now and you can watch whatever you want anytime you want. You can go to Cold Stone Creamery and have all these different things put on your ice cream with all this different kinds of ice cream.
Yeah.
Kids are living in a world of choice. There is just
Mhm.
choice everywhere. We got Amazon. You can just buy what you want and have it show up in one day.
Yeah.
And yet they go to school and they have very few choices. And so
Mm.
building some choice in and paying attention to students' interests is really important. And so I think those are some key factors.
That's super helpful. Thanks. How might a parent know if their child is underachieving, or maybe they're very upset about something, or how can it how can you discern uh, if they're actually not able, or if there's something in the way?
Yeah, that's a tough one. And I know you have an interest in 2E, and I don't have tons of expertise in it, dabble in it a little, because there are kids that have been assumed to be underachievers when they're 2E. And so
Mm,
there's an issue with learning and so they're just not being taught appropriately. And so if things were different in the environment where they were learning, they would be successful. As a parent, how do you know? Well, as I said earlier, Gene Peterson says, don't freak out if the kids got some passion about something. We all have highs and lows. We can't expect that everybody's going to be going 100% all the time. We all need downtime. Uh, Even Renzulli's definition of giftedness is that certain people at certain times under certain circumstances, and so you're just not 100% passionate all the time. I hope that didn't mess up the that recording. But uh, so where you get concerned, I think, is when there isn't anything they seem to be interested in at all, and Uh, I think that's a big factor. Also, you ask about, well, how do you know? You can talk to kids, and I'm a big believer in active learning. So directly asking, sometimes you get a legit answer, sometimes you don't. But
yeah.
uh, I've told a story, when I've done presentations about I was learning active listening. Active listening is where you paraphrase back to the person what they said so
Mm,
that you're showing that you understand. And so
hmm.
you're not giving advice, you're not questioning, you're just actively listening. Okay. So I'm learning this from the guidance counselor, and I think this is a bunch of bunk. And I walked back to my classroom, and there's this kid at the water fountain, and I said, "How's life?" And he said, "Okay." Now, normally I would just go on with life, but I said, "So it's going all right." And he said, "Not really." Okay, the kid just told me okay, and I just repeat that back. And I said, "Oh, so not going so well." And he says, "My mom and dad got a divorce." So I got active listening. So I said, "Oh, your folks split up. I live with my dad now." "Oh, you're living with dad now." I'm not that great at active listening, okay? And he said, "I had to babysit my little brothers last night." And the bell rang and he's gone. Okay? End of conversation. In the yearbook, 6 months later, he wrote, "Thanks for helping me with my family problems." And I thought, when did I help him with his family problems? And then I realized it was 15 seconds at a water fountain when he wasn't upset about a divorce. He wasn't upset about living with dad. He was mad because he had to babysit his little brothers last night. And it was putting him in a foul mood and he needed to tell somebody about it, you know? And so that conversation switched a lot from how's life okay to I had to babysit little brothers last night. And so, as a parent, when your kids seem a little out of sort or something, and they
Mhm.
might say, oh, school sucks or whatever, it may have nothing to do with school. You don't know. And so if you can active listen through it and get them talking, you can kind of understand that. And so that may help some. But um,
That's a
I mean,
great tip.
if your kid's doing all right, passing, and has pretty decent grades, I don't, think you need to get, totally bent out of shape or too worried. We've Betsy and I a number of years ago did something for the Davison Institute, which is this institute in Nevada for very highly gifted kids. And we were on a call-in thing for them a couple of times, and we had these parents that called and they were just freaked out because their kids were getting straight A's, but they wouldn't do the extra credit, and and I'm thinking, okay, you have a happy, healthy kid who's getting A's, and it bothers you that they won't do the extra credit to get the A plus. Okay, give the kid a break. I mean, they're doing well. Be happy and enjoy that you have this healthy human being, and you have this healthy human being that's doing okay in school and pretty happy. That's a real treasure to have. And so what if there's a B or C once in a while? It's not the end of the world. I said like I did really well in college. So I graduated a 4.0 from college and the stress and I put it all on myself. Okay. But the stress my senior year was unbelievable. What if I blow it? And it's getting harder and harder and harder, and that last semester, and I'm doing this course on history of mathematics and which was not necessarily an easy course. And I just freaked. It wouldn't have hurt if I got a B. It wasn't the end of the world. But, sometimes kids set themselves up for that too. And so it's okay to make mistakes, because mistakes are the way we really learn. And sometimes our mistakes cost us something on grades, sometimes in school. But, if you learn a lot of good stuff from it in life, you're maybe further ahead.
I have sometimes said to students, I messed up, and they're, want to rip the paper up or something. And I'll say, well, you learned what it isn't. Like
Yeah.
there's a story about Edison
And that's knowing something,
and it is,
that's as important.
you know what it's not.
Yeah.
It's not completely nothing.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it means that's not it, but there's probably a whole 100 other possibilities that you could try. And
Yeah.
I found that part of that is their relaxation with being creative. Like, oh yeah. Um, so yeah, anyways, I it, this whole thing fascinates me because I had one that was probably labeled an underachiever. And they're both my kids. They're both going to the same schools. It's a whole lot of same, but their attitudes towards school were really, 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 really different.
Yeah.
And to this day, I'm not really sure, but Microsoft, you know, program developer, Microsoft doesn't care.
Yeah.
Not one iota.
Yeah.
So, do you think anything in the environment, like, for example, I know in Renzulli's model, there's the houndstooth design around it.
Yeah.
And there's the thing about putting a seed under a rock or, that kind of thing. Do you think there are certain cultures or environments that are gonna not um, lend themselves to being gifted? Like maybe that label, I've
Eh,
heard people say, if this is a gift, can I give it back?
yeah. Yeah. There are factors, there are messages society sends to people. Uh, peers, peers are a big factor. Interestingly, there was a study done where they looked at, how well kids did in school, and they looked at their friendship group at the start of the school year and at the end of the school year.
Hmm.
And what they found is a student is more like academically his or her friends at the end of the school year than at the start of the school year.
Hmm.
So I don't know if the achievers tend to find each other and the underachievers tend to find each other throughout the school year, or if you kind of become what the group is and the group takes on an identity and you're hanging around with achievers and so you just kind of get in that as well. But there is a kids are more like their friends at the end of the school year as far as academics than they are at the start. So
Hmm.
that is a factor. I would never tell my kid not to play with someone because that kid doesn't do well in school. So I put in some
Yeah.
caveats in here, but there is uh, some of that plays into it.
Hmm.
Sylvia Rim, who's written a lot on underachievement, and
Hmm.
you know, I work on a textbook with Sylvia, and she's got she's pretty strong on some things. And
Hmm.
so she says, for example, that you shouldn't use est words, est, words that end in est with
Oh,
kids, like best, brightest, prettiest, fastest, because when you're an est, you have no place to go but down. And
wow,
so you
that's
have no
cool.
room for growth. If you are the fastest, that's it. Now you could get faster. So you want to get faster. You don't want to be the fastest.
Hmm.
Yeah. So she's very adamant about that on the way we compliment kids and
Mm.
don't say that she's the smartest,
Mm.
so that's one thing with Sylvia. The other interesting Sylvia's found, and she does a lot of work with underachievers, and actually she's in her late 80s and still working in schools as a psychologist, which is really cool. Uh,
That's my plan.
yeah. Uh, so she says that all of us need role models in our lives that demonstrate that if you put forth effort, you'll get some results. That
Hmm.
working hard gives benefits. That so we need this role model, so that the kid doesn't fail to see a connection, for example, between working hard in school and getting grades, for example. So she says that we need these role models in our lives who demonstrate that putting forth effort results in good outcomes. Okay.
Hmm.
And she would say that the role model has to have three characteristics. One of them is that role models tend to work better if you perceive yourself to be similar to the person.
Mm.
Okay. Because if you don't think you're like that person at all, then they're not a very good role model. I'm nothing like that. Okay.
Hmm.
Um, Interestingly, she says also the role model has to be perceived as having some autonomy or control in their life, some choice.
Huh.
Okay. And then the third thing is that the role model has to be demonstrating that you produce effort produces stuff, that working hard pays off. Uh, and sometimes parents serve as those role models. Sometimes older siblings serve as them. Sometimes coaches serve as them. Sometimes youth pastors serve. Sometimes teachers serve as them. But Sylvia would say, if you've never encountered anyone in your life that you admire and you see that they have some choice in their life and they're in control of their life and the good things happen when they put forth effort, that you're not going to maybe internalize that as much as you could.
Wow.
I tell the story because of myself. So I had the greatest dad in the world. He was like the Pillsbury Doughboy. Everybody loved him. Little kids climb up on his lap wherever he was. And he also had a motto, I was looking for a job when I found this one. And so he worked as a butcher, as a mail carrier, as a school bus driver, as a mechanic,
Wow.
as a farmer, as a jewelry shop guy, as like a counselor, dorm guy at a boys' reformatory. Um, and every time he mastered a job, he quit because I did that. Now what?
On that?
I'll go on to the next thing.
Wow.
So we lived pretty much off my mother's salary of minimum wage at a grocery store, right? Because he always had to start at the bottom again. And
Oh, yeah.
he had a great life, and he was a super sensitive dad, and I could not ask for a better dad.
Mm,
But there's probably a reason I didn't go to college till I was 26 years old, too, because
mm,
I did not have that role model in my life that said, okay, buckle down, kid, you know? uh, And it happened I was working in photography and I worked at this newspaper, and the newspaper editor happened to have a PhD, believe it or not, in this little tiny town where I grew up. And he had raised two kids in California, and it hadn't worked out so well. And he had a couple of kids later in life. And so he and his wife bought this little newspaper in the middle of nowhere, Montana, and he ran it like the New York Times. And we won best newspaper in the state in our category every year. He was just brilliant, and I worked with him, and I was his photographer, and then I started doing
uh,
ads and writing stories and stuff, and hanging around him for 4 years. I suddenly went, maybe I could go to college, and maybe there's a benefit to going to college.
mm,
And he set me on that path. That doesn't take anything away from my dad, because this guy didn't have the sensitivity that my dad did,
mm,
and I always was so loved. But he was the role model I happened to need at that point. So at least
mm,
in my case, probably what got me on a path was having that role model. So in that sense, I have to agree with Sylvia. It wasn't until I was in my mid 20s before I ever encountered somebody like that
mhm.
was a role model like that.
I had honestly never thought about that, but in my own life, when I think back on it, the idea of getting your doctorate was like, well, yeah, doesn't everybody?
Yeah. So you had those role models, and like you were at conference, you hang around with all these people. They have them. Well, why don't I have
Yeah,
one? Yeah, yeah,
both my parents were very education oriented, and I swore, like, I am not going to become a teacher. And for 2 years, I tried not to. And then so
yeah,
I quit university and went and did something completely different, studying the theater. And I discovered that teaching is like improv. And
yeah,
all of a sudden, it was like, ooh, I have a captive audience. I have
yeah.
5 kids,
You're on stage.
and I'm on stage all the time. This is fun. But I didn't teach an academic subject. I was an
Yeah,
art teacher and a
yeah,
drama teacher. So maybe that made a little difference. I'm not really sure, but certainly, yeah, in my family, the idea that you might not go to college would be like, you might not put your shoes on today.
yeah. And that ties into something that Jackie Eccles and Alan Wigfield talk about. Is they're like kind of four reasons. I'm going to oversimplify this now, but they're kind of four reasons why people engage.
Mm,
Uh, One of them is it's tied to their interest, which we've already talked about. Another reason people engage is that they see it as useful for their future,
mm,
you know? So I might not be that interested, but this is going to benefit me down the road.
mm-hmm,
Okay. Another reason is that it's useful right now. And that's why sometimes when people aren't motivated, that the rewards work, because they can't see a benefit to it, but boy, you're going to give me something? All right, I'll do it, you know? So it's benefit, right? And then the last one is what you probably had, and that is it's tied to their identity. So they don't even realize it. But in this family, this is what we do. In this family, we go to college, and you don't even question it because that's what you do. Or in this family, we play golf, and that's just the
Yeah,
way it. And nobody tells you that, but you have this identity, and
yeah,
that's what motivates you. And so, um, and Dweck would say, so you kind of got to figure out which of those you can work with. Sometimes with underachievers, it's not that easy though. But is there something about their identity that I can get them hooked, to get to
mm,
engage, or can I play off their interests? You know,
mm,
rewards are really, yeah, a really tough thing because if somebody is intrinsically motivated to do something, the last thing you would want to do is set up a reward system for them
yeah,
because they love it. And you do not want them to start focusing on the reward because you can actually kind of take the focus away from their passion for it. Okay.
yeah, yeah. I've seen,
However, if somebody won't get off the mark, sometimes a reward will get them going, you know? And so that's what's really difficult as a parent and as a teacher, especially as a teacher, because in your classroom, some kids might need some kind of reward system. And for some kids, that reward system would be deadly. It could actually negatively impact them.
yeah,
And how how do you pull this off now? Because why do they get it and I don't get it? And then trying to be fair,
yeah.
when I was a teacher, we identified a girl for our gifted program, and both her parents were teachers, and they believed in the intrinsic value of education. And they had two daughters, and the older daughter had already got into high school when the gifted program had started. And so this gifted program starts, and we test their younger daughter, and we want to place her in the gifted program. And they're just kind of shocked because they say, well, she's an average student. Our older daughter's the brilliant one. This one's just an average student.
Hmm.
And I said, yeah, but we'd like to kind of try this because the test scores seem to indicate, because, okay, so this kid's got some high scores, okay, on our cognitive test.
Mm.
Well, she's just an average student, and I said, well, let's try it, okay? And this is back when, I'm going to date myself, when Dairy Queen introduced blizzards, okay? And I think
Remember
blizzards
that?
have probably been around for 30 or 40 years now. Uh, uh,
Yeah.
and we had a Dairy Queen a block from the school.
Ooh.
And so I said to my kids, and I didn't give them their grades because this was in a pullout program. I said, if you get all A's back in your classroom, I'll take you and a friend out for a blizzard. I okayed it with the principal, and we walked over to Dairy Queen, and of course had a friend, so you're not alone with the kids, so that you have two of them going with you.
Ah, yeah.
Now, I should have said if your grades improve or you get, because now I'm setting them up to be perfectionists, so that's wrong. But this little thing liked blizzards, okay? And so the first grading period, all A's. She and our friend and I all went over and we got a blizzard. And all year long, every report card, all A's. And because nobody expected her to get all A's, actually. And because she was just this average student in their perception. And so then the blizzards quit, but guess what? She kept getting good grades. She graduated valedictorian of her class. And her father, okay, so this is like in fourth grade, and now we go 8 years later, she graduates. And her dad came to me and he said, Dell, enrichment really worked for her. And I wanted to say, no, blizzards really worked for
Dairy
her.
Queen.
Yeah, because the reward got her off the mark, and she suddenly realized, I like being a good student. I can be a good student. And then she just stayed doing it because she liked it,
That's wonderful.
but the next kid you may not work with. So, we're all different, but
Yeah. But those are four really good. Could you recap those four for us? Because we're coming
okay,
to
it's
the end of our
tied to
time.
your identity. it's something that's useful right now is why you want to engage. It's
Okay,
something that you see useful for your future,
got it,
or it's something of personal interest to you.
got it. So interests, good now, good in the future,
Identity.
and it's just the way I am.
That's who I am.
That's
And
who
some
I
of us are like that, and some of us aren't, you know?
am. Um, you may eventually get asked this question, but people are in my family are saying, well, what are you going to do when you retire? And I said, this.
Yeah.
And they were like, no, 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 no. What are you going to do when you retire?
So it's very much about your identity, too.
This.
Yeah.
Because when people say, well, what do you
And
do for
interest.
fun? This.
Yes.
This is what,
It's who
uh,
you are. Yeah.
this is
And
who
what
I
you
am,
like. Yeah.
and
And it
this
works.
is who you are, and it works. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, any last words of wisdom as we kind of come to a close, or tips? You've given us several really good ones.
Uh, I guess one thing is we're all works in progress
Mm,
and don't give up. So if you have a kid that's struggling, you hang in there and you support them and you listen to them and you try to give them resources and you try to pay attention to their interests and value their interests. And sometimes it's hard to value some of their interests, but they're all interested in video games and things. But um, and you also understand that we're works in progress. And even you and I, and I'm older than you are, but um, a little bit, yeah, but not much, but a little bit. Anyway, uh, we're still works in progress, and we're all
absolutely.
and so just because a kid is a certain way right now doesn't mean they're going to be that way later. And you've parented and I've parented and that little freshman, sophomore, eighth grade period there, at least with both of my kids, they were kind of not the nicest little human beings, but they didn't know that. They were just trying to figure out who they are. And so it was really fun, like with my oldest now that she's a senior in high school and she likes being around us now again. She came out of her room, uh, and
Yeah.
my son's still in his room. He's at that stage where they just kind of disappear for 2 or 3 years
I, I remember.
and they're incubating somehow, and then they come
Yeah.
out, and there's this nice little human being there, because you've put in the effort early with them, and you continue to put in the effort, and he's starting to come out of his room too now, and so yeah, we're all works in progress, and so we really have to appreciate who they are and support them, and let them fulfill and be whatever they are.
Follow their bliss.
Yeah, that's nicely stated.
Well, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. And I've had fun and I learned a couple things too.
That's what we're all about. Yeah, I've had fun too.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad. So bye for now.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mary Grace, for doing this. And
You're welcome. You're
it's
very
important
welcome.
work that you're doing.
Thank you. You as well.
All right, thanks.
Bye.